It is 6:30, Monday, October 14th, 2024. We'll call the City Mayor City Council meeting to order. If you could please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any additions to the agenda tonight?
Mr. Mayor, I have no additions for tonight's agenda.
Hearing none, I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. With that, we will move to public comments. If there's anyone who would like to discuss anything not on the agenda, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll close public comments and move to the consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that should be pulled for further discussion? Hearing none, I'll look for motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. With that, then we will move right into business items. And we'll have a presentation from the Watertown Mayor State of School. From Darren Schuler, please.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And again, Commissioner Johnson, Administrator Johnson, and each year, since I've been here, we've been able to come over and do a State of the Schools address to the council and give you an update on the great things happening within our schools. And tonight, our school board chair, Hunter Felt, joins us as well to be a part of this. And so again, thank you for the opportunity. We'll just click through, and Nick, you got the controls, it looks like. Last year when we were here, we had the opportunity to lay out our new strategic plan. So we are in year 2 of our strategic plan. And again, those 7 strategic commitments are truly what guides us each and every day. Our board, it drives our administration, and it drives our staff in those 7 particular areas. Our vision card is our report card, if you will. All students have a report card. This is our district report card. So this can be found on our website. This is just a snapshot of what that looks like, but it gives us our strategic direction, how we're measuring that direction, and then some of those descriptors in the middle column of what we're using to get that information, and then the level in which we fall into. So each year we take a measurement of where we're at and how we're moving to that level 4, which is where we'd like to be in all of our areas, which is that 95th to 100% area in all of our strategic directions. One of the things I'd just like to highlight tonight is some of the feedback that we receive at the end of our school year. And we ask our staff, our students, and our parents to give us feedback on how we're doing. One of the things that we talk a lot about is just our staff and how they feel about coming every day as teachers, or as custodians, or front office staff. Everybody gets this survey and can participate, but 94% of our staff agree or strongly agree that they would recommend to a parent that they would select Watertown Mayor Public Schools for their child. That's a pretty impressive number. 90% strongly agree that a fellow staff member demonstrates a genuine concern for their welfare. So again, really encouraging staff to be together as a team, support each other throughout the school year, inside the school building, and certainly outside too, being there for each other. 84% agree or strongly agree that they would recommend a family or a family member or friend to work there. And that was one example. That was a little low for us. We thought 84%, we can do better. So one of the things that we're working on this year as one of our goals is get kind of the bottom of that. You know, why are some of our staff saying, I might not want a family member or a friend to work here? So that is some of the work that we're doing this year and just building our staff climate. Our next one is the parent survey, and just 2 pieces that we pulled just to share tonight. But 91% of our parents who took the survey agree or strongly agree that they are proud to have a child in the Watertown Mirror School District. That also is on our vision card, and you can find that on that document as well as one of our measurements. 96% agree or strongly agree that their child has a connection with one adult in our school. And that's a really big piece in terms of our connections with students. That's a really proud moment to have 96% of parents saying that they feel their child has someone they can connect with at school. And we know that will breed success on the academic side as well. And then in terms of our student climate survey, 90% of our students, and this is grades 3 through 11, we do a separate survey for our seniors, but our 3rd through 11th grade students say 90% of them agree or strongly agree that they're treated fairly at school by teachers, by staff. 83% agree or strongly agree that they have feel seen, valued, and heard at school. And this is one of those areas, again, that we felt this is lower than we've had in previous years. Why only 83% say that, agree or strongly agree that they feel seen, valued, and heard at school? So again, taking a deeper dive, just understanding the why students may be feeling that way and making those connections. One other issue that came up last year, and this has been an ongoing trend since COVID, was just our district-wide absences. And right now, you've maybe seen in the news or in other publications that schools are really working hard on chronic absenteeism. And that means basically 14 days absent or more in a school year, you're considered basically a chronic absentee student. We looked at the data across all 3 of our buildings, elementary, middle, and high school. Elementary was about 19%, 17% at the middle school, and almost 20% of students, so almost a fifth of our students were considered chronically absent. So that's a pretty big issue. And so we're really, as one of our focus areas this year is to reduce that percentage by about 4%. And just looking at strategies on how to do the early intervention, when you see a student that's been gone a day or 2 in a row, if the parent hasn't reported them absent for a particular reason, what are we doing to reach out and make that connection on the why? What can we do to support you get back to school? And typically in the high schools where we see our biggest concerns of students just not coming and for no reason. The flip side of this, I think our data is a little bit skewed in the fact that if you know our kids, and some of you have high schoolers, I know, they're gone a lot for other things. And we have kids that participate in a lot of different activities, a lot of different events. So they're pulled in a lot of different ways. So this data was, it was data that was for unexcused and excused absences. So that number gets pretty high pretty quick. But part of it is too, we know our kids are active and they're out supporting unified sport events and things like that, and they're active. But we want to get that number down because we know kids in seats are learning, and if they're not in seats, our seats, that's an issue. One other area in our strategic plan that we're highlighting this year is our community ed program. And our focus there is community ed provides a high quality and interest-based learning opportunity for our communities. Some pretty cool data here I think you'll appreciate, but 83% increase in our adult programs offered. So we're continuing to really push some of our adult programming. 76% of our participants rated our programming very good on their end of the course little survey that they take. And then an 86% increase in participation. So our numbers keep going up in our community ed programs, which is great. And then 98% of the participants identified the program that they took met their expectations. So some other data, which is interesting, we offered 459 programs, which kind of shocked me even, the number of programs that we've offered last school year or last year. Out of those are 144 adult programs, 4 senior programs, 91 aquatics programs, 159 youth programs, and 61 early childhood programs. So pretty expansive. The one that's really catching on is aquatics has kind of hit a rebound. Our aquatic numbers are skyrocketing. Our pool is getting used at least 6 days out of the week, and which is great. We've done some major refurbishing to the pool in the past year, and it's really paying off in our participation numbers. Even we offer private lessons. They're booked. Most of our swimming lessons are booked within the first few days. So that's really taken off as one example. And then our enrollments, you can see the number of participants in each of those particular areas. So again, our youth program certainly is our number one, but you can see adult programming is still doing really well. And I think too, our programming is neat in that we offer so many diverse classes to really meet the needs of our community, which is really fun. Young Royals, currently right now it's our preschool program. We have 9 classes, 98 students in our preschool programs. And then our kids company which is our child care program, and our Caring Hands child care. Right now there's about 294 students in those programs. We are looking to expand our child care. That is one of the bigger issues that we see, I know certainly in Mare and Watertown. Families just don't have childcare options out there. So we have a proposal to expand 2 of our classrooms into a larger room that we can hopefully take on around 25 to 30 more students in that 3 to 4 range. So we're looking to do that. Hopefully after the first of the year, we should be able to open that up. Our biggest problem is employment, getting people employed in childcare and just finding those workers that are highly qualified. And it's not, again, someone you can just pull off the street and plug them into work the next day. The training is certainly pretty intense, and you want highly qualified people working with our youngest children. So that's part of the problem we're struggling with, is just finding high quality folks to put in those positions, because we know the need is there. We hear that a lot from our communities. Flipping a little bit over to some of our academic growth. This is data that we're extremely proud of. And we just did some comparisons to local districts around us in terms of MCA reading growth. Now, the MCAs are Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments. They're taken in the spring. That's still the state's way of kind of showing how districts are doing. It's a measurement of your district level growth. So in the column on your left is our MCA reading growth from last year to this spring. And we grew 5.5%. Now, MCAs are taken through 3rd grade through 11th grade. So we outgrew most of the districts in our area. Math, even more proud in the fact that we grew almost 10% from one year to the next year in compared to districts around us. So again, seeing some really nice growth in terms of how our students are moving forward. Parking lot construction. If you've driven by some of our schools over the summer, we've had some major parking lot and sidewalk and lighting upgrades. We use some abatement bond funding to complete some of these projects, which were needed, some major upgrades. One of which, and if you come to the middle school drop-off area, we created kind of a center sidewalk area that really separates those 2 parking lots. This parking lot in the past used to be kind of the Wild West, and students that were coming out of the building, Nikki's rolling her head. She was a parent, I know, that waited there picking up her own children. But our idea is we've separated the 2 buildings now, high school and middle school, for parent pickup and drop off. We were really getting our middle school parents to drop off and pick up and coming off Quarry Avenue, which is on the west side of the high school. And it's worked out really well. And that sidewalk creates a really nice walkway for our students to use the stadium, the turf, the track, and really creates a safer environment for kids. The one on the far left is our high school upper lot. Again, just retaining walls were falling down, just needed a major upgrade, and that got remodeled, as well as some new sidewalk for busing. Students waiting for buses just didn't have a lot of space. That improved that area. And then the CLC was probably getting the most work. That is, nearly 100-year building, and some of the parking there was inadequate and also just needed some major upgrades. So With that, when you tear apart a parking lot, the county watershed makes you dig a little deeper in retention ponds and things. So that project's taken a little bit longer than we had hoped, but we've added some new parking to the front of the building, which provides really a nice complement to our senior folks that use that building and have a little shorter walk. But it's also been a really nice addition, and we're finishing up that project here, hopefully by November 1st, weather permitting. But we'll have added new parking on all sides of the building with curb and gutter. Also a new basketball court and pickleball court, as well as an upgraded baseball field that's been kind of offline all summer. And we'll get that back and a nice upgrade on that. So some nice things are happening. And again, just like all projects, you try to get to the finish line here before the snow flies. Enrollment trends, I think I talked a little about this last year. One thing that is concerning for the district is our ADMs. And again, that's the average daily membership. We call that butts and seats, if you will. You can kind of see where the district has been since 2017. It was our high point at about 1,572 students. And that's peaked and valleyed, and certainly the COVID year of 1920 to 2021, we saw a pretty significant drop of students, either going non-public, they're homeschooling. Those are the two main ones. And we just haven't got that group back yet. And then we're also seeing a dive in our demographics. So we're certainly seeing across the board, again, families just not having as many children. And so that's a demographic piece that we're watching. This year, we're at 1423. So you can see we've lost almost about 150 students over that stretch of time. Is that about 7 years of time there? So obviously the district has to adjust accordingly budget-wise. We did go through about 400,000, little over that last year. Again, this year we're hopeful. We thought there'd be some reductions. We're going to wait and see where that comes in. But again, that is an ongoing trend for us. And certainly we've talked to Nick and the city administrator in Watertown as well, just talking about growth and what does that look like, because that certainly impacts our district as well. And just a little bit more to where do district funds come from? Well, 70% of our district funds come from the state of Minnesota, but we always feel that right now it's not kept pace with inflation and operating costs, continuously trying to update that. As a result of that, most districts depend on voter-approved levies for adequate funding. And last time we had a pass one was in 2019. So you probably remember that at about $492 per student. So the levy takes about 10% or 15% probably of our funds comes from that. And then the other remaining 10% or so comes from federal funds. So, but the state, obviously with ADMs is our biggest piece, where we're relying on our student population to drive our funding sources. So lastly too, here a couple of cool items. Niche.com is, if you're not familiar with that, it's a search engine for families looking for schools. So if you're a family looking to move out here to the West Metro area, this is a very popular website. They recently came out and noted that Watertown Mayor is the 25th best public school in the state of Minnesota. Pretty cool nomination, which puts us in the top 7% in Minnesota public schools. So something that our parents and our staff and our students all should be really proud of. So if you get a chance to do that, jump on. I threw myself up there, 111 reasons to be a Royal. One of the things that we're asking parents and community members to just tell us why it's important to be a Royal. And again, we're just trying to get the word out on the great things we have happening in our communities and in our school district. And we're looking for folks, any of you, if you're interested, we would gladly take your statement. It literally is a 25 word or less quote on just why it's valuable to be a Royal. And we've got students participating. We've had one mayor already. Well, you can use another mayor to join us. But again, feel free. I'll reach out. I'll actually send out an email too. I can maybe send it to Nick, but we'd love to have you as a council member or city administrator jump in and just say a few nice words about being a Royal. Just again, trying to get the word out on the great things that we're doing on social media. So, and speaking of social media, we have a great social media following, but if you haven't followed us, those are some spots to catch some of the great things that are happening within our district. So with that, open up for any questions that you might have.
Do you, on the MCA scores with the growth,
Yeah.
do you know what the finals, like how we tally with the other schools kind of in that?
Yeah, right now we're kind of in the middle. So that group that we showed there earlier, and I don't know if Nick want to go back to that. Yep, we're right typically in that middle area. So we're ranked probably out of this group. Is there 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? We're probably 4 or 5 in most in the reading and the math in most of our growth spots. And so yeah. So we're obviously looking at Waconia, Delano as kind of our two comparables, and we're trying to certainly catch them. And I think we're about 2 percentage points away from Waconia, and then we're moving towards Delano as well. So it is one of those things internally. MCAs aren't everything. We know that. It's just one glimpse in time for students, but the state uses that data obviously to get out there and publicize. So it's still important to us that our students try their best and try to get that continued investment from the student side. So that is one of those pieces that I think, especially at the high school level, like what's the value in this for me? So it's been a really change in our paradigm a little bit to say, it really is a reflection of our school district. It's a reflection of our parents, our communities. If you're not doing well, not giving your best effort, that's all we're asking, to give us your best effort. But just in that 1 year of really kind of shifting that dynamic of teachers really saying, we need you to do your best, try your best. It's kind of gotten us back again to that mode of, where we probably should be and where we can potentially be even further. So, but again, it's just one piece of growth. It's
Yeah.
not everything. Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Nick, do you have anything?
No, and again, we appreciate Mr. Johnson's participation. I know he came over and did a tour with us in the spring. He had lunch with us a couple months ago with our new teachers over at Agave. Again, really appreciate his ongoing dialogue. I know he's met with Board Chair Felt and I a couple of different times just to talk about collaboration between the city and the school district and continue to promote the good things that both of us are doing. So we appreciate that.
Likewise, we appreciate the same and keeping
Yeah.
relationships built and coming and addressing us and
Yeah.
with you and Hunter, just building that relation to keep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Anytime we can help. Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
both for coming in. Excuse me. And with that, we'll move on to number 11, the 2025 prosecution contract with Carver County. And tonight we do have the county attorney, Mark Metz here.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm Mark Metz. I'm the Carver County Attorney, and thanks for inviting me to come out and talk to you briefly about the prosecution contracts, what we're doing in our office, and kind of some trends that we're seeing in the county from our perspective. The Carver County Attorney's Office contracts with 10 of 11 cities to prosecute lower level offenses, essentially. By statute, we're required to prosecute all felony crimes, but the cities can contract with county attorney's offices or privately to do DUIs, traffic offenses, some gross misdemeanors, misdemeanor thefts, things like that. So Chanhassen is the only city in our county that chooses to contract with a private law firm. It's pretty unusual actually across the state that you'll have county attorney's offices that prosecute for the cities. A lot of city attorneys, contract out and you'll have a firm that does, 20 cities. And but what I think is good about that is we have a core focused energy and services for our cities then, and we're very victim service oriented, and we go to all the bail hearings, all the court appearances. We have 2.5 victim witness coordinators who will contact victims of crimes, work with them, support them, advise them of what their rights in the process, which is absolutely critical. I mean, anybody that's been a victim, and probably most people have, unfortunately, it's really important that they have that one-on-one contact. And we treat it really seriously, our relationship with the cities. So we've had this relationship for a long time with Mayor and the other cities. And our fees are essentially determined by what are our costs that we have for prosecuting these types of cases. And then we take the fine revenue and we reduce that off our staff costs. And then the county cost allocation is a contribution that our county board contributes to reduce the cost for the city so they can have these contracts. And they really believe strongly in this relationship. And so I think that's important as well. And I appreciate, that they do that. And so we get a surcharge essentially that is split between the cities based upon usage. So we take a 3-year average of how many cases do we prosecute. Obviously for Mayor, it's not that many. City of Chaska, it's more significant. And then just the last portion of that was there's a 9.34% county personnel cost allowance, and that's inflation, and that's just county-wide. So I worked with our finance director over the last couple of years to determine what's fair for the cities, what rate should we utilize, what does the county have, so that can go up and down depending upon inflation essentially. So then the next slide, this shows our caseloads. So it gives a good idea of looking at the city of Mayor. 22 cases we prosecuted. Again, these are just lower level offenses in 2021, then 13, and then 13 in 2023. And so we have a 16-year average, a 16 cases for the 3-year average. So that's only 2% of all the cases that we handle. So then the next slide shows what the usage and the rate comparison is, and then the contract cost. So if you see the contract for 2024 for Mayor was $1,870.87. And then the proposed contract is for $1,847.54 for 2025. So it's a slight reduction. And that comes out to about $100 a case. So, this is something I believe really strongly in, that we should be doing this for our cities to prosecute this and to give it the attention it needs, because a thief is a thief, if you will. If you steal $100 or $1,000 or $100,000, I mean, I understand there's more significant consequences, but you still have the intent of stealing from somebody, just as an example. So if you steal $10 in a grocery store, we're going to prosecute that case. And now we might have some type of fair deal when they come to court to say, okay, we'll put you on probation, you pay a fine, maybe do some sentence to service work. And if you don't have a record, maybe you can keep that off your record in a year, depending upon what the facts are. But we also don't look at it as though, well, that's such a low level offense that we're not even going to be able to handle that. We do. And I always say we'll prosecute stealing a pack of gum at Fleet Farm, and we prosecute for Carver too. And we have, a fair amount of crimes that occur out there. So you can see from this chart, the more high usage cities of Chaska and Waconia pay more, and Chanhassen obviously isn't in there. So, and the next chart. So that is a pretty quick analysis, I think, of how we charge for our prosecution contracts. But I like to just talk briefly about some of the things that we're doing in our office and some trends. And unfortunately, we've seen increases in crime. It's not profound or significant in terms of the overall numbers. We've just seen more cases of criminal sexual misconduct in our office. And those are really difficult, complicated victim crimes. And so we've seen almost triple in some of those cases. And it takes a certain expertise to prosecute those cases. So that's been challenging for our office and our victim coordination, because they're, some of the most important cases that we have. So that's been an increase. We've seen more increase in some child protection too. But our office, as you know, maybe some of the viewers don't know this, we don't just prosecute cases. We have 34 employees, 18 lawyers, and we have a criminal division, a juvenile division, and a civil division. And so we have managers that manage those different divisions. So while we prosecute, we also handle all child protection cases for the county. And we handle the juvenile delinquency cases. So, a 14-year-old that steals or breaks into a car or something, we prosecute those cases as well. And then our civil division, we advise all of our departments and we advise the county board. So we're the attorney for any contractual issues. We're the attorney for legal issues that arise. So it's a robust office. It's really the biggest law firm in Carver County. So the high profile you get from the high profile cases, obviously like with Prince and some murder cases and things like that. But the day to day is our lawyers and staff are working really hard, to provide legal advice to our different departments that we have, public works and, social services, the sheriff's office, employee relations, things like that. Another thing in our office that I'm really proud of is we created a veterans court and a drug treatment court. So our veterans court started in 2014. And it's just thriving. And it's a really intensive treatment court for veterans who commit crimes. And you probably are familiar with this, and most counties now have this. But what it does is it really provides intensive services to these veterans who have served their country and have committed crimes, usually because of alcohol, drug abuse, and or mental health issues. So if we can get them these intensive services and accountability, they can thrive and they can complete this program after 1 or 2 years. And they come to court consistently at least every month, and they see the judge, and they're held accountable by the other mentors, and they're held accountable by other people that are in this. And so we've seen great successes that have graduated from that program. And then in the last 5 years, we started a drug treatment court, which the focus is similar in terms of providing intensive services, but that's a different group of people than veterans. Veterans are in serving their country and then not falling on hard times, but, having difficulties in their lives. With the drug treatment we want accountability as well. And we want to provide those types of treatment and intensive services where they're accountable too. So it's not a get out of jail free card. It's you have consequences. Hey, you tested positive over the weekend, and so you're going to spend 2 days in jail. What? Yeah, you're going to have accountability. So most people that graduate from these say it's a lot more work than the traditional probation that you go through. But our goal is to reduce recidivism, and we've seen that because we're going to see the same revolving door. Our county board has been committed from day one to these programs, and it's really critical, and our courts obviously are. And so we've partnered well with Carver County and law enforcement, health and human services, the courts, probation, because they're all taking on more work, not getting more staffing, but taking on more work because they care and they can see this, and they're proud to see the graduates come and say, I was down and out, and just to hear their stories about, I never thought I was going to get to see my child again, and now I'm sober and I'm thriving. I have a healthy relationship. So we're proud of that because we often don't see the brightest side that when we're working on these cases. And so, we care about these individuals too. We're not just there to say, well, you committed some crime. We don't want to see them. We want to see them be productive members like you do too. So we've seen a fair amount of now graduates in drug treatment court. And the great thing about the drug treatment court is that we've now received 2 significant grants. And so we just got an enhancement grant of, I think, $750,000. We got $500,000 to start. And now we apply. We didn't think we were going to get it a couple of years ago, and we got it. So that's great because, these programs cost money, especially for testing. And that's really important to frequently test them and have that accountability. So Judge Janet Kane has been instrumental too. And so I want to recognize her because she helped start the veterans program, the drug treatment. And so she just retired last week. And she was in the Carver County Attorney's Office for over 10 years, ran the juvenile division, was the manager before she became a judge. And so we work closely with her with the veterans. And that's just a great example of our collaboration. Why I think Carver County is so special, because we really do collaborate. And while we have different roles, we try our very best to get along, because the job's hard enough. And so, like, let's just try to work together. So we do things like we have a justice advisory meeting where we meet quarterly to meet with our judges, the sheriff, chief of police, probation, all the heads of the departments, the defense bar, and we get together, we have lunch, and we just talk about things and issues, and you get to know and respect each other so you can work through these things. And so I know in talking to my colleagues and even the judges, they're like, yeah, it's definitely a special place in Carver County, because we can still be strong, zealous advocates, but we can still collaborate for the best interest of people. So, and then we started a new case management system. We just finished it. If you've ever done that, it's like the stages of grief when you're going through that in your office, because, there's the, the denial and the anger and those different phases. And I was like, are we going to get past that anger phase yet of this? Because it's hard. We had the same case management system for 20, 30 years in our office, and it wasn't working efficiently and effectively, and the costs were going up. So it's a big move to change, how your cases are processed that they've been working on. But we did, and the county contributed $150,000 up front, knowing that we're going to save money over the time because we're going to be more efficient. And we're past those stages now, and we're running, and it's great because it's interactive. And just for example, like, we get discovery, which is evidence that comes in a file in a case. And instead of having all these CDs and paper and everything, we can get it electronically, get in the case management. We can hit a button literally to send the discovery packet to the defense attorney. And so we know when they open it up, as opposed to here, we got to package this in the mail, and then they say, I didn't get this, so we're still working on that, but that was a big change for our office as well. So I'm happy that we're coasting now. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration, but we're doing better. So, but the last thing I would say is really that when I go around and speak to the cities, it's the dedication and the commitment of our staff in the office that breeds the success that we have. And we really do have dedicated public servants that are committed their careers to helping people. And we're all integral in our office, and everybody's really critical. And so I'm proud to, lead the office, and really proud of our group and what we've been able to accomplish, and hopefully continue to when we have new goals as well. So that's a quick snapshot of our office, and wanted to highlight things, but I certainly appreciate the opportunity to come out and visit with you.
Oh, absolutely. We appreciate it. Any questions? Thank you. I do appreciate the presentation. Mr. Mayor.
I just want to say, in the 2 years that I've been with the city of Mayor, it's exactly as you said. My experiences with you and all of your staff have all been excellent.
Thanks.
I've not had anything close to a bad experience. All very helpful, very supportive, willing and eager to collaborate, and it's been very good.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I echo my conversations with Nick and some of the present stuff we have going on, or past stuff. It's all been smooth, and communication's been great. So I do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm available too. So if there's something, that's how we want to work. Just like you probably would, you're like, well, just call me, Mark, and we can talk about or find out or if there's things like that. But yeah, thanks for allowing us to prosecute for your city as well, and allowing me to come out and just visit.
Great relationship.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. With that, then I'll look for a motion to enter into agreement with Carver County and the city mayor for the 2025 prosecution contract.
Motion.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Oops. And with that, we will jump into ordinance 246, amending City Code Chapter 51 regarding utility billing, collection, and charges.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the exact same ordinance that we had looked at from the workshop. I did post it on the website. The only, I'd say, change that I implemented on here would be the effective date. I added this section at the bottom. The effective date for this ordinance would so normally when you adopt the ordinance, you publish it in the newspaper and it becomes effective upon publication. The effective date of this ordinance, based upon all our discussions, would go into effect as of March 1st, 2025. So that would be for the April cycle.
Perfect. Thank you. Any questions for the city administrator? Hearing none, I'll look for a motion to approve ordinance 246.
Motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just want to say that I don't agree with this. We've talked about it. I struggle with, changing the date for minimal gain and efficiency to then have a list of exceptions that we're going to manage, which will ultimately negate any efficiencies, in my opinion. Knowing that 20% of our residents pay within that grace period, and then there's another 10% who are behind. So ultimately impacting up to 30% of our residents. I do not support this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Yeah.
Motion carries 3-0 or 3-1. A mistake. Thank you. All right, with that, we will move to consider action land use agreement with Mayor Baseball Club for City Hall property usage.
Thank you, Mayor. So at our last meeting, we had talked about the location for the storage shed be on the west side of the building here. And then I had mentioned I'd put together a draft or a land use agreement for consideration. So we've got that before us here. A lot of this is very standard terms. I think in here, some of the items to talk about, I had written in for the term for 20 years, if 20 years is what we want to go with, through in there. For rent, put in $150 per month for use of the premise. And then one other item I would like to talk about for potential inclusion is we got the term for 20 years and we've got the rent at $150, but I failed to put in any provisions which talks about what, if any, rent increase and how that happens and what factors contribute to that, how that would be handled. Otherwise, standard insurance here, general liability on that, indemnification. It's a pretty simpler boilerplate agreement. I did have this reviewed by Chris Smith, who works for the League of Minnesota Cities. The League of Minnesota Cities has a service that they offer to all cities where Chris will review any contracts that cities are reviewing to make sure they stand up to sufficiency. So I had ran that past him. He had a few edits on there, but otherwise it was looking good. So turning it over to council, talking about term, the rental amount, and then rental increase factors and how that ought to be handled.
Thank you. So any thoughts on how it is, making additions? Did you have any input? Me and Nick talked earlier about this, and it's maybe a review every couple of years to put some language in there. Or do we want to, I don't know if we want to put a specific amount of an increase. Do we? I mean, not knowing how economies are going to change and how things change,
Right.
like a $25 every year. Well, what if after 5 years, that's just way out of line? And, we just put that we review it every 3 years, 5 years.
Yeah, and I think normally if this would be a contract with, say, a private company, cell phone tower rent, for example, and we're doing that, we'd want to have factors, rental increases in there, 3%, all of that. But when we're working together with another local organization, we're trying to help each other out in this whole thing. I think that's where you then loosen up on that sort of stuff. So I think if we included language that said every 5 years, City Council will review the rental amount to determine if a change is needed. And then we'll talk with the baseball club and work on it collaboratively.
Okay with that. And then I didn't get a chance to call you back later this afternoon. 2 other things. should we have a shed size in there not to exceed? We talk a lot about the shed. Should we, and we can even make it a little bit bigger maybe than what it is going to be today, but should we have something there where it doesn't increase to a 50 by 50? Right,
Triple decker.
Well,
Um,
I don't know if we need to.
So off the cuff, my reaction would be you could include language that says, as of this contract, the shed that's going in is 12 by 20 or whatever it is. Should the shed ever be requested to be amended, expanded, or otherwise torn down and rebuilt, then that must be then approved by city council.
That, or could we put in like the size of the lot that we're providing them and saying it can't be anywhere bigger than that?
Could do that too.
Without council approval or something. I mean, something like that.
So I think the space was 16 by 27 or something like that, if I remember mapping it out. I mean, the total location side was something like that.
Yeah, I think so. I would say 16 by 30, but
26.
We just add something in there that if it's gonna exceed the existing, that it requires council approval.
What is the wishes of council on that?
I'm open to whatever people want. As long as we have something in there.
Any strong feelings one way or another?
Yeah, I think the way you worded it before I said anything would be fine.
Okay.
And my final comment is on the terms there that you happen to have up right there. Do we have to put the 20 years in? If either side can cancel it after 90 days, do we need a year? Do we need that? Or is that just common language? Seems it's open then, right?
Right. You could have like 20, the idea being that 20 years gives long-term stability outlook. And typically you wouldn't cancel this unless you had you can do it for any reason, but given the special relationship between a local nonprofit and the city organization, unless there was something really egregious or city hall expands, which probably won't ever happen, but some event, some significant event to really change things. That's the 20 years is, I mean, it is legal language, of course, but there's a symbolism to it that we see this as a long-term venture between the two. So you could throw 20 years in there. Otherwise, you could do term that 5 years, and unless otherwise, it shall just auto-renew every year thereafter. So it just goes.
I don't know if 20 years seemed like a long time, but then the more I thought about it after we talked, it's like, well, if either side can cancel this after 90 days, do you need that? But I understand the commitment part of it, so I'm okay with it. Yeah, I'm okay with it. Yeah, that's just my thoughts. We can leave it then if everyone else is fine with it. So do you want a motion then with those couple changes?
So with the shed size, I think I'll do the language I proposed. If everybody's comfortable with agreeing based upon that, I'll write good language. Otherwise, I don't, I'll defer to Peggy on this one, her being on the baseball board. Is there an immediacy to get this in place for the baseball club, or can bring it back 2 weeks from now and so we can actually see the language?
yeah, the only thing would be, I mean, right, we're probably not gonna have a shed till the spring.
Okay.
The only thing would be prepping groundwork.
And now Mike and I and Paul met out there and we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, so outside of that,
And in that case, then
You'll just update it and bring it back next council?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Let's do that then. That is everything then. We'll move to city council reports. Councilmember Wagner, anything to report on?
I have nothing.
Councilmember Fausch.
Nothing.
Councilmember Neely.
We just had a virtual sidewalk meeting to just go over the survey results, kind of some next steps. Took some things off the list of priority. We redid priority, like reprioritize the different sections. I think that's all we really talked about. We talked about a lot of stuff, but it was just,
It was good. Just in case any of the viewers are watching that had strong opinions about some of this sidewalk addition choices, Birch Drive was dropped off the list. It just ended up being way too contentious, and most of the feedback was don't put it in. So the committee decided to drop that off entirely.
and I think one of the main focuses is fixing problem areas, moving to cement over tar or asphalt, and then really working on a connection to Fieldstone. And then eventually making a loop, maybe down 25, but that's secondary. But it'd be 7th Street connection.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Anything more?
Nope.
Thank you. And I have nothing more to report on. So with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Motion carries 4-0. We are adjourned. With that, we can jump right into the workshop and call that to order.
Thank you, Mayor. All right. First on the list, 2025 budget updates. I don't have major, well, I don't have a slew of changes. For the general fund, the tweaks in here, the one is to interest earnings. In 2023, it was 1,000, and the budgeted figures, 2024, we had it at 3. And in 2025, I'm upping it to 15 right now. Let me get that 41,036,200. Our interest earnings for the year are at 36,000. Just doing a whole lot better investing in the funds that we have. And then the general fund, as we saw in the packet, the general fund balance is just doing a lot better. So there's more to invest than there has been in previous years. So I knew this 3,000 coming into 24 was awfully conservative, but that's what I like to do with my revenues to see how things were going. So we're doing much better than that. And I will recommend we stay conservative in that and go, even though we've got 36 here, depending on how things go, put that at 15 rather than upping it the full route. And if we continue to have good trends, hey, great. But this gives us a little more leeway on the budget side. For refunds and reimbursements, and this is under 42,100, which is our public safety department code, going from 9,500 to 11,000. And this is the reimbursement that we get from the Carver County Sheriff's Office for our para amount that comes from the state. So normally, if you have your own police department, similar to how fire departments get fire state aid, police departments get para state aid back. So this is an amount that Carver County gives back to us each year for that para aid. So they give it back to all the cities. This year's we got back, it was a little over 11,000. So that tells me I can up it to 11,000, knowing that it never goes down. It always goes up based upon the expenses of Carver County. So knowing that, upped it by a little bit there. And that is it for the general fund. So when we come down to end, based on the adjustments we have, we're currently sitting at about 25,000 revenues over expenditures. And as we get closer to December, we'll figure out how we want to balance out this budget accordingly. Work on that. On the water end of things, excuse me, similar story. Penalties and interest adjusting down. We're just not seeing as much as we had in previous years. So bringing that down to 6,500 to bring that more in line with what we're seeing come in for this year. Excuse me. And then again, interest earnings, a little bit on the conservative side. So right now we're looking at interest earnings on the water. We're currently at about $6,000 on that. No, that can't be right. I got to look at that again. Looking at that, and it was already cresting close to that $12,000 mark. So upping that to be closer to what we're seeing in actual. And I don't think we had any other changes on the sewer end. So right now with a no increase to the rates, keeping them steady, and that'll bleed over into our next discussion after this on the budget. We're looking at a slight deficit of about $3,300. On the sewer fund end of things, penalties and interest decreasing that for similar reasons. We already increased interest earnings at the last go around, and that was the only significant change on that end. So for 2025 budget, because the debt dropped off for the sewer fund, and we haven't initiated the wastewater treatment facility project and incurred that debt yet. We're currently sitting in a holding pattern until we see that happen. So our revenues over expenditures are at just under $146,000. In the storm sewer fund, interest earnings for similar reasons brought that back up, investing that proper. Interest earnings are currently sitting at $5,500 for storm sewer. That will likely get up to the $700 by the end of the year. So feeling comfortable bumping that up. Late fees, decreasing that. We're just seeing less late fees across the board. And then for capital outlay, this had been returned back to 15, returning it back to 35. It was 35 this year with the plan to do the sonar project for our ponds to determine depth levels. That did not get accomplished this year. So we'll roll it over and do it next year. So it's money we didn't spend this year. We'll just rebudget for it next year. And that is the long and short on the budget updates. Any questions on any of those?
For me.
All right, roll over then into discussions on still on the budget, but we had talked about the potential of how we're going to thread future utility rates when we know that water debt's dropping off. We know that eventually wastewater treatment facility debt is coming on, and what does that actually look like? The general consensus of the council was that if we can keep things steady for the customers, that's what we'd like to do rather than have big shifts in things. So I worked on that to put numbers together for council to take a peek at. So this is based off of our utility rate study that we've looked at. Last year we looked at it for the first time, but still in there. Looking at keeping the rate that you can see here, flat 100% means it's flat. So if it's 101%, it means it went up by 1%. You can see here in 2027, when the debt falls off, looking at adjusting that down by 25%, reducing that down. And so you're seeing that actual surplus generated in 2027 in that 9.4%. And as we discussed before, typically utilities want to see that 5 to 10% actual surplus range is where you're targeting. But in those interim years where we look at actual surplus generated based off of potential future budgets, running a small deficit in 2025. We looked at this number isn't updated, but that was a 3,300 we just looked at. So about 4. And then in 2026, that grows a bit due to inflationary factors at a 26 budget. And then in 2027, that corrects itself going forward now that the debt has dropped off. So this right here would be, if we kept things flat, that would be the deficit that we run, but knowing that in the future that then turns back into a positive. So it's not a perpetual deficit. And as you've seen from our financial reports, this the water fund is sitting well. End of year for 2024, which we'll talk about. I'm looking at about $485,000 in the water fund, which is still a very, very healthy fund balance. So losing this to get back to this, make it up, you'll make it all back up in 2027. When you go down and look at the sewer rates, again, 2020, I have the debt coming on in 2026 as a predictionary factor. So in 2025, you see that surplus we had in the budget. In 2026, assuming the debt comes on. If it doesn't, this turns into another surplus. But factoring in the debt coming in for the wastewater treatment facility, you have a year of going down by 44,500. But then in 2027, again, to balance that utility bill, you would have to increase by 20% on the sewer end to bring it back into that normal range of 5 to 10%. So the real question is, that's all great on a numbers aspect, but how does that impact your everyday citizen? And that's where we do these utility bill estimators. So these are the two columns you're looking for. These are all the same because rates stay the same. So when you go from 26 to 27, all other years being the same, what does that look like on a monthly basis for a utility bill? So if you're using 6,000 gallons, you're currently going to get charged $133.17, and that would go up to $134.35. The idea being, as water rates drop and sewer rates go up, you're blending that into a nice smooth transition rather than trying to sewer rates go up early, but water hasn't yet. So rates go up, but then water goes down. So the water total utility bill comes back down. We see it on the fund level, but your resident just sees the bill on that. So holding rates steady, that's what it does to the funds. I think it's at least from my professional opinion, it's an acceptable impact to keep rates steady so that in the end, this is a very smooth transition for residents in 2027.
So water would go down and sewer would go up.
Basically,
But
yes.
it would kind of be like a net number.
Yeah, a net can't slight up, as you can see here.
Right,
Anybody,
slight up, but not as bad as if we didn't. Yeah, okay, I get that.
normally, if you just kept it true in 2026, sewer rates would jump that 20%. But then your water rates are still up because the debt hasn't fallen off. And then in 2027, your rates would drop down because now you're implementing your water rates, or water rate reductions in that. This uses the fund balance to float it so that it's a really smooth transition. Anywhere between 0.5% to 2.5%, depending on your usage.
I certainly prefer this scenario. I don't see raising it up for 2 years to bring it back down. I think we should be able to manage through those 2 years. We're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
I think we should be able to balance through that.
But we can look again next year to
Yep.
see if we're still in the same track.
Right.
Yep. And that's exactly what this being our in-house document, we get to update it as we see fit to meet current needs. So we'll look at it every single year to make sure we're staying on track.
Yeah. I think we just ride it out.
So that's what I've got on those two fronts. And then, so go on to the 24 year-end predictions. This is something I like to do in-house, but now as we're getting towards the end of the year in 2024, bring it forward to council, discuss how we're seeing the budget line up versus actuals. So by each of the funds, in the general fund, the original budget was $1,088,388. I'm predicting it'll land in that 1.28 range. And the bulk of the revenue increase in that building permits are up. Again, across the board, you'll see this with the funds. We intentionally budget low on building permits and building activity. If you have great years, that means you're going to have budget surpluses in the revenues. But if you end up having not as many built for whatever reason, then you're still in line and you're still okay and you're not having to face a revenue shortfall. Miscellaneous revenues are up by 10,000. That was, we had, when Metronet canceled their service, they gave us $5,000 as part of a transition program. If we needed to use it for anything, basically. As part of that, the other 5,000 is smattering of this, that, and the other thing. That's why they call it miscellaneous revenues. I always budget those low because you never know what miscellaneous is actually going to be, and I don't want to get caught on a revenue shortfall. Interest income, as we had saw, up by 35,000. The biggest contributing factor, though, is the cell tower rent. Since we corrected that this year and got that all back in order, the back payments plus the months of rent that we are now getting, since we have everything line, is going to total to be about an extra $75,000 into the general fund for this year, which adds some good value. And then reimbursements are up by 15 thousand. We had the Volmer insurance rebate through the Department of Public Services reimbursement program that I found. So that should be something we apply for every single year. And for next year's budget, I have that budgeted in. And then we also had the LED rebate from the project we did. We finally got that. So overall well, I'll do expenses first before I hit the end point. For expenses, budget is the exact same as revenues, but predicted year end, about 20-ish thousand less on that. And bulk of that is due to consulting services, auditing, engineering, and legal being lower by about 22,000 on the whole between the three of them. Just haven't used them as much as we normally do. And that's a testament, I think, to staff being more proficient at what we do and bringing expertise to bear. So we don't need to rely on those services nearly as much. Fire department wages were under budget by 10,000. I think I talked about this past. The spreadsheet that I inherited for calculating that was not accurate. We have since corrected that spreadsheet, so now it is accurate, and that's reflected in the 2025 budget. And Parks Electric is down by 9,000 because that's what I thought we'd be using in utilities for the splash pad. So since that's due to start in a week or so, we're not too worried about the utilities for the rest of the year. Then the various other departments slightly up, slightly down to balance out the rest of it. So for general fund as a whole, I'm going to be predicting we're about 200,000 revenues over expenditures on the year. So on lack of a better term, extra 200. And if you recall, when we were having discussions about the fire department para expense and the total sum of that, I had mentioned I had ideas about where that might be able to come from. This was it, but I hadn't penciled in the numbers quite as well as I was hoping to get a firm feel about this. So if this holds true, and I would say we wait until after the audit is complete, so we have all the adjusting journal entries. I don't think there will be many. Tracy's doing a fantastic job, but I want to be sure once we have post-audit figures that 200 still holds true, which I think it will. But once we have confirmation of that, then we can come back and talk about, do we want to apply that towards paying off that para expense like we discussed, which was $219,000. And the general fund, even if you take the 200 towards that and you're talking an extra 19, that proposed that would come out of, well, either the reserves or we have the 37,000 that was budgeted just for payment of the para expense for 2025. You just line item that part and then we're done with it. And you're still ahead on things. So that would be as long as all holds true, that'd be my recommendation for dealing with that in the future. That's something we get to delete off as a line item we don't have to deal with anymore to get out of our hair. So this is a graph if you recall from when the budget, or not the budget, the audit happened, the auditors use a similar graph in the presentation they do. It's the budget amounts from year to year, and then the actual fund balance, although 2024 and 2025 aren't actuals quite yet. And then our fund balance policy of how much we should have in there. So you can see in 2024, we're floating up there in that range, but I would predict if that holds true in 2025, that would then come back down because then you potentially spending that on the para expense. But just to get an idea of how that's relating with our fund balance policy as part of that. So doing well, and over time, we've been building that up to get it above our fund balance policy. I think this is probably a bit higher than we want, but it's getting close to that 100% funded, which between 50 and 100, where you like to be. For water fund, original budget of 540-ish thousand, predicted year end of 473. Water sales are going to be down by roughly 108,000. And that's due to very low irrigation use. Our water connection fees are up by 35,000 to mitigate on that front because we've had more houses built than budgeted. On the expense side of things, expenses are up. Original budget of $514,000, predicted year end of about 535, 540. Water plant electric usage is down, and that's because we haven't been producing as much water because irrigation hasn't been happening. The two big contributors to the expenses being higher. One, the water tower painting repairs that we had to do, and then we had a couple of water main breaks that pushed our repair and maintenance budget over the edge. The two earlier this year that we had to deal with. So for water fund on that, predicting year-end balance, deficit by 66,000 overall, all said and done. So fund balance going down a little bit on that. And in these numbers, you gotta flip them around a little bit as you get to the end here. These two should be flopped with these two because the labeling wasn't great in Excel for that, and I couldn't get it to do what I wanted. So you got to flip those numbers back and forth, but we are staying above our fund balance policy, and I think this is going to stay above our fund balance policy, which is 50%, which is a good one to have. Absolute bare minimum you want is 3 months worth, but this is 6 months worth. So we're still above that, and looking at 26, 27, note what we're doing with utility rates, we know there's going to be stability there. On the sewer fund end of things, original budget is $679,260, predicted year end of $787. Interest income significantly up because we are investing a lot more money and getting that going for us. And the sewer fund has a lot more money. I just looked at it today, about 1.6 million invested with the sewer fund, which is drawing some good returns versus the other funds. Again, SAC fees are up by 35,000, more houses built than average. On the expense side of things, original budget of 779,000 and predicted year end of, I did two scenarios because we have the wastewater treatment facility engineering going on, which is planned, but that is eating at line item expenses. So I did one accounting for the engineering and then one assuming that was just taken right out of reserves and we weren't letting that negatively impact our budget, so to speak. I mean, it is happening, don't get me wrong, but just looking at what it would be if it was a regular year and you didn't have the treatment facility, what would the budget look like type of arrangement. So predicted year end, 1.4 million, but that includes wastewater treatment facility engineering. If without, it'd be at 787, slightly over expenses, but originally we were projecting a deficit in the sewer fund anyway. Waste project area up by 800,000, that was predicted. Wastewater treatment facility costs down by about 27,000 overall, and that's because since you're using less water, we're processing less at the facility. Well, no, that's not true because that's irrigation. I misspoke on that. We're seeing less costs on that, and Kyle and I talked about it. Let me restate that. We talked about that, and we're not sure why the electric use is down, but we're saving electricity there, so we're going to keep an eye on that. But overall, chemicals, electric repairs, capital outlay are all lower than expected. So that's our sewer fund balances. You can see we're taking the dip down from 23 to 24, and that's entirely due to the engineering on the wastewater treatment facility, and then we see, since that'll be over this year, that's not going to continue into next year. We see our fund balance drifting back up before we take on the wastewater treatment facility project. And the reason this dips down is our fund balance policy is based upon our budget. So when the budget dips down like this because the debt is no longer there, the amount we hold for fund balance policy also dips accordingly. Storm sewer end of things, original budget 84,000, predicted year end of 89,000. The interest income being the main contributing factor on that one. On the expense side of things, engineering's down, going from 53,000 to 17,500. Engineering being down by 5,000 as we're nearing the end of the project out at the wetlands. We're just using less of those types of services, repairs and maintenance, which is the work being done out there, down by 3, and then capital outlay down by 30 because we didn't do the sonar on that. So there you can see our fund balances as they continue to grow. I think as we get into 2025, take a harder look. Well, once we do the sonaring and get that, we'll take a harder look at the rates, see where they actually need to be, because we're growing the storm sewer fund, but we don't have future long-term expenses in place yet. We know dredging is going to need to happen, some other storm utility work. We got to get that CIP and things in order to really help us learn where those rates ought to be. They haven't been changed in years and the fund still continues to grow, but we'll get that in order on that. So that's my 2024 update on that. So we'll get down to the fun talk. Well, we'll talk about weed. So January 1st, 2026. So what I'd like to do with this is more of a have council be aware of where the discussions are starting type of thing. I'm not looking to get in the weeds on all the different provisions for this. This is going to go to Planning Commission to have the bulk of the work done. But since it's a brand new topic with cities and our city council, the Office of Cannabis Management was tasked with putting out a model ordinance for cities to use as a template to help regulate cannabis now that it's going live in 2026. So this is based upon that template. Some of the major things in here, just want to touch on. So read this at your leisure. If there's anything in here that is jumping out at you that, hey, we should really take a hard look or make sure Planning Commission is aware of this, let me know. I think the big things in this, we get down to the registration of cannabis businesses. This is where I've been talking with Mark Metz prior to the meeting. Cities can either keep the registration authority, which means you then license and register the cannabis businesses, similar to what you would do with tobacco businesses that are currently being done, or you can choose to, Carver County's willing to have cities delegate that off to the county for them to handle the registration work. We keep the zoning control and the zoning ability, but they would take care of, similar to tobacco, taking the applications, processing them, doing compliance checks, things of that nature. Again, I'll always reflect to this part of it mirrors very closely to how tobacco is handled. The cities in Carver County, so talking with other cities, the cities in Carver County typically that are doing their own tobacco compliance, doing their other similar types of compliance checking, they're tending to lean towards keeping the registration authority because they already have the structures in place internally to deal with that. That's just one added thing in their structure. The cities that have delegated off the tobacco licensing authority to the county and let them handle it, they're tending to look at this and go, let's delegate that to Carver County as well, because then they can just handle it too. Because they're not, mayor being one of them, we're not set up what we could be, but we're not set up to do those types of registrations. So as this evolves, my recommendation, as long as all things hold similar, is that the language in here, if the city so chooses, we would adopt a resolution that would then transfer that authority to Carver County. That would, as it stands now, that would be my recommendation. And in there it says we can have no fewer than one registration for every 12,500 residents within mayor city limits, and that comes right out of state law, which this applies to the cannabis retail businesses specifically. So we have to allow one. It's not a question. You have to allow one, but the limit in state law is one of those per 12,000, 5,000. So we would have to grow to 12,501 before we were legally obligated to allow a second. Now, that does not preclude the city to say, hey, we want to let as many as humanly possible. And you could go it that way, but you can't restrict any fewer than that on that front. Other major parts of this, a lot of this comes right from state law, so I didn't change a whole lot of it, other than some of the names. The requirements for cannabis businesses. Oh, I didn't bring up that graphic. Okay. There are buffer distances that we can take into consideration that are available through state law. And let me get to that real quick. My apologies. So there are minimum buffer requirements depending on what the facility is. So cannabis business, a retailing business, can't be within 1,000 feet of a school, 500 of a daycare, 500 of a residential treatment facility, or 500 within an attraction within a public park that is regularly used by minors, including a playground or athletic field. I had some internal talks with John Anderson, our city planner, and he's had his eyes on this too. We've been going back and forth on this, and he raised the question of, does a regional trail qualify as an attraction used by minors? Which is an interesting question to have. So I've posed that over to the county to give them, I posted to OCM last week. I'm sure they're getting inundated with questions every day, so hopefully I'll hear back on what their interpretation is on that.
This really limits where,
This is an incredibly rough map. So how the buffer works is it goes from the boundary line of the property and then extends out there from there. However, our GIS software doesn't do that the greatest. So I'm able to create circles of distances. So I did that. So from basically the center and outwards is 1,000 feet. So you can see when we get on the north end, that is at probably, because your boundary line's actually here, so that probably pushes it out even further. So most of the boat shed, any commercial on the north end is pretty well locked out. You got a little bit area of the Norris shed, or the boat sheds here that could possibly be, that is currently zoned commercial, the C1 district here. Otherwise, the bulk of this blots out the entirety of the downtown as a buffered out area. Although, if Andy Metzold is listening, he has a wonderful business opportunity,
unless the regional trail,
unless the regional trail comes in.
the regional trail is a part, then that blocks him.
But Mayor Lubberg could, if they wanted to do a little suite in here and rent it out, boy, they could have a little, we'll see what Andy feels about that. But yeah, if the regional trail does apply, there would be a 500-foot buffer around that, which would, so that's a 500-foot buffer, that smaller circle here. You can just, that would blot that out too. That really, and then you have the playground equipment here at Meadow, which takes out some of Shimcor, along 25, I should say. But Shimcor is left relatively unscathed with these requirements. And that being our CI area, that's in this sort of relation, cannabis retailers tend to get treated a lot like sexually oriented businesses when those started becoming more prevalent back in the 80s, 90s. When that came about and those regulations came into play, a lot of those, you couldn't zone them out of existence. You had to provide a space for them, and those generally got relegated to the industrial areas, was the typical practice for that. So the buffer is kind of doing that on their own. Discovery Park, could put a circle around that, but there's no commercial up in this area. If at some point in the future commercial would develop up this way, the buffer would automatically apply on that. So we look at the buffer map there. A lot of it our existing commercial gets blotted out. Where that comes into play is where we get down into the zoning and land use section. For the various types for cannabis cultivation, this would be for growing, relegated to the agricultural districts and the commercial industrial. If you ever had an indoor grower that wanted to do it on an industrial basis, they could do it in the CI. Cannabis manufacturing of products in the commercial industrial district, hemp manufacturing in the commercial industrial district, wholesaling in the CI, cannabis retail, and talks with John, and C1, C2, and CI would be acceptable uses in his mind to have this in here. Of course, this could change. You could X out C1. That's not a requirement. C2 for sure aligns with what's being done there. C1 is a close one, and then CI for sure. And that cannabis transportation, commercial industrial, and then cannabis delivery businesses, and that's type C1, C2, and commercial industrial on that. Any other type of use on that would be prohibited until such time as the city has had a chance to review the ordinance and update accordingly. Another part of this is these are all proposed to be classified as interim use permits as opposed to, say, an allowable use or a conditional use permit. The question becomes, do you make it a CUP, a conditional use permit, or an IUP, an interim use permit? And the biggest difference between the two is a conditional use permit runs with the land. So once a conditional use permit is okayed for a site, then it's good for that site for the existence of the site because it runs with the land. An interim use permit runs with the owner. So if it were ever to change, city gets another chance at relooking at whoever's taking it over, what their plans are, things of that nature. Over time, if cannabis becomes, assuming it'll become a non-issue and it just becomes a thing like alcohol, this could change and these things can get more lax, but this tends to be where things are leaning as far as the upfront thing until we see how this all shakes out. Hours of operation in here, I've got here listed 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. This is something that'll get discussed. The state limits that, the state limitations are 8 a.m. to 2 a.m., Monday through Saturday, and then Sunday, 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. But then law also provides for local units of government to restrict out 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. So state is 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. But the state says, well, as a local unit, you could push that up to 10 a.m. if you want to cut out 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. You could do it up to 10. You could do 9. You could do 9:35. You can adjust that. And then on the back end, you can adjust that from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. So if you thought 2 a.m. is too late, you could back it up to midnight or 11, or 9 is the earliest you could back it up to as far as restricting those times. So I just put those in there as placeholder numbers. Planning Commission will take a look at it. Actually highlighted, this was the incorrect one I highlighted. I should have highlighted the one up here for that. Temporary cannabis events, those are allowed by law. Those are the hours of operation we can set on that. Whoops. Go away. Another thing that we didn't deal with was lower potency hemp edibles. And this is something I know very little about, but if you're curious on definitions, that is right out of state law, what a lower potency hemp edible is. I'm sure there are people who are far better versed in this than I am, but consists of servings that contain no more than 5 milligrams of delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol or 25 milligrams of cannabidiol, or the rest of that, which I'm not going to go into. But this is something that we haven't regulated. This is stuff that gets generally added to existing products, pastries, gummies, lower hemp type of edibles, not the full strength type of stuff. If you have like, if you see the cans of things that
Oh, the THC drinks.
THC drinks, yeah, things like that. That's what this stuff really is. I didn't do a whole lot with it because I don't know if we want to regulate it or not. If it's a big enough issue that we really, really care, I say give thought on that as council members, and if you have strong feelings that we really want to get into it, let me know. If you don't think this is something we care about enough, let me know.
They're already legal in liquor stores, right?
Yeah,
They sell in liquor stores
Are
today.
they selling them in gas stations too?
yeah. We can regulate them if we want. Mull it over if you have strong feelings about one way or another. And then last section here is just preserving some language. If we at any point want to establish cannabis, municipal cannabis store, we can, but this does not obligate us to. So that's the overview of the cannabis ordinance. We'll be taking this off to Planning Commission for further review, and then January, February, have something for adoption in front of City Council.
This is a good framework for them to get started as a starting point. So I appreciate it.
With that, that's all I have for the workshop.
Perfect. Anything else on that before we close up? All right, then let's adjourn.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.